They made me serve in torn clothes. Then Fashion Week called about my designer line. What if the worst humiliation of your life turned out to be the key to your dream come true? Hey, my name is Caroline. I never thought I would be betrayed by someone I loved, especially not in front of so many people. But there I was, standing at the center of the room, in front of a crowd that had come to admire my work, and feeling as though the ground beneath me had completely disappeared. It was supposed to be my big break, the first event where I would showcase my designs to a room full of influential buyers, celebrities, and critics. This was my moment, my debut. And yet, all I could feel was the weight of my own humiliation pressing down on me. I had spent months working day and night, pouring every ounce of my energy into creating a collection that would not only reflect my unique vision but would also set me apart in an industry that thrives on exclusivity and prestige. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Fashion is unforgiving, especially for someone like me, who didn't come from money or a well-connected family, but I was determined to make it work. My designs were different, bold, and raw just like me. But then it happened. The person I had trusted most in the world, my sister Claire, stood there, laughing at my expense, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. She had always been the picture of perfection, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was the one who had to fight for everything. From the respect I deserved to the attention my designs finally got. I remember how the laughter felt like a slap across my face. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the way Claire, someone I had once confided in, had abandoned me in that moment. She knew how much this meant to me, and yet, she chose to mock me, to ridicule me in front of everyone who had gathered to witness what was supposed to be my shining moment. I could see the joy in her eyes, the delight she took in my failure. What hurt the most was that I had never expected it from her, not from the person who knew my deepest fears, my struggles, and my dreams. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the way she betrayed me openly, without any hesitation or remorse. My sister was always the one who helped me navigate the world, the one who made me believe that I could succeed, despite all the obstacles in my path. But in that moment, I realized that the person who had always been by my side wasn't the same person I thought she was. As I stood there, trying to hold my composure, I realized I had a choice. I could either let this moment define me, or I could use it as fuel to change everything. The tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not let Claire or anyone else see how much they had hurt me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to look away from the cruel smiles that surrounded me. There was no turning back now. I had come too far, and I wasn't about to let a moment of betrayal stop me from achieving my dreams. But the question lingered in my mind. Would I choose to stay silent and let the pain eat me alive, or would I find the strength to take control of my story? I didn't know the answer yet. But one thing was certain: I would never be the same again. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, going through the motions as if my body was on autopilot, while my mind replayed the event over and over. The laughter echoed in my ears long after I had left the venue, and every step I took felt like a reminder of my failure. But it wasn't just that one betrayal by Claire that haunted me. It was all the smaller betrayals I had ignored over the years. I had brushed them aside, telling myself that I was being too sensitive, too quick to assume the worst. But now, in the aftermath of the night's humiliation, I couldn't ignore them anymore. They were all there, waiting for me to face them. Remember the way my mother used to dismiss my dreams as unrealistic? "You're not going to make it in fashion, darling. It's a tough world, and you're just not built for it," she'd say. Her voice always soft but cutting, as though she were trying to protect me from failure. I hated the way she made me feel small, as if I was never going to amount to anything. She didn't believe in me not like I believed in myself, but I was so desperate for her approval that I kept pushing forward, trying to prove her wrong. Then there was the way Claire had always acted like she was the one who had it all figured out. She had the career, the friends, the perfect life, and I was always the one who had to watch from the sidelines. We used to dream together about what our futures would look like. But somewhere along the way, those dreams stopped feeling like ours and started feeling like mine alone. She would tell me that my designs were good, but they weren't marketable. That my ideas were too daring, too different, but those words, those little digs always stayed with me, even when I tried to brush them off. I used to think I was just being too sensitive, that it was my own insecurity that made me read too much into it. But now I realized that those quiet betrayals had been building up for years. waiting for a moment to reveal themselves, and then there were the moments with the people I worked with, those who had smiled in my face while quietly undermining me behind my back. I had always known that the fashion world was cutthroat, but I never imagined the cruelty could come from those I considered allies. The emails that went unanswered. The meetings where my input was dismissed as too ambitious. The backhanded compliments that were supposed to sound encouraging but only served to reinforce my doubts. There was one particular instance that stung more than all the others. I had just finished a meeting with a potential investor, a person who held the keys to the next stage of my career. He had smiled warmly at me, praised my vision, and said he'd be in touch soon. But when I left the meeting, I overheard him talking to someone else in the hallway. He wasn't talking about my designs or my potential. He was making jokes about my appearance, about how exotic I looked and how my style was refreshing but too bold for mainstream tastes. I had to fight back tears as I walked away, the sting of his words cutting deeper than any criticism of my work ever could. I wasn't sure if it was his condescension or my own vulnerability that hurt more. As I reflected on these moments, I realized something I had never fully allowed myself to understand before. I had been gaslighting myself. I had spent so many years convincing myself that I wasn't good enough, that my worth was tied to the validation of others. I had allowed people to make me feel like I didn't belong in the world I was trying to build for myself, and it had taken Claire's betrayal right there, in front of everyone, to finally shatter the illusion that I had to keep playing by their rules. But now, I was left with the scars of those years of emotional neglect, and the question gnawed at me: could I truly confront the wounds that had been hidden beneath the surface for so long, or would they remain buried, festering quietly, a constant reminder of the parts of myself I'd never fully accepted? I knew I had to face them, but I couldn't help but wonder if I was ready. Could I pull back the layers of pain and truly see myself for who I was, someone deserving of love, respect, and success? Or would I crumble under the weight of all the years of hurt and disappointment? As the days passed, I found myself walking a tightrope, caught between the pull of my past and the desire to break free. I wasn't sure which path I'd choose yet, but I knew that if I didn't confront these hidden betrayals, they would continue to control me. The question remained: was I brave enough to confront them, or would I bury them once again? I don't remember exactly when the shift happened, but somewhere between the humiliation at the show and the quiet hours spent reflecting on everything that had led up to that moment, something inside me changed. I was done being passive. I was done letting life happen to me. I couldn't keep waiting for people to validate my existence or my talents. If I was ever going to reclaim my narrative, I needed to take control of it myself. The pain I had carried for so long was still there, lingering in the back of my mind, but it wasn't going to define me anymore. I had spent too many years feeling like a spectator in my own life, standing on the sidelines while everyone else got to call the shots. That was the moment when I made the decision to stop letting others shape my story. I had been living in fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the truth, but the fear of never truly living, of letting my potential die in the shadows, finally outweighed it all. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Taking control meant making difficult choices, confronting uncomfortable truths, and stepping into a world where I was no longer a victim, but an active participant in my own journey. And with that realization came the overwhelming sense of power I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I began with the simplest action. I stopped seeking approval. It wasn't a grand gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. I didn't need validation from the people who had turned their backs on me. I didn't need the fake smiles or the empty praise. I had spent so much time wishing I could be accepted, wishing I could fit into a mold that wasn't mine, that I had forgotten the most important lesson: my worth was not determined by their opinions. My worth was inherent, and it had always been there, waiting for me to realize it. The first step was telling Claire how I felt. For years, I had let her get away with things, let her words and actions slide because I didn't want to cause conflict. But no more. I had to tell her that what she had done at the show was unforgivable, that I could no longer stand by while she laughed at me, that I was no longer the same person she used to know. I remember the fear I felt when I picked up the phone to call her, my heart pounding in my chest. But I knew that this was part of the transformation. I couldn't keep hiding from the difficult conversations. I couldn't keep silencing myself just to keep the peace. When Claire picked up, I was surprised by how calm my voice was. I didn't yell or beg for her to understand. I simply told her how I felt. I told her how deeply her actions had hurt me, how I had always supported her, but now, I needed her to acknowledge the pain she had caused. Her response was predictable. She was defensive, dismissing my feelings, as if my hurt was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But this time, I didn't let it slide. I told her that I wasn't asking for her approval or forgiveness. I was telling her the truth about how I felt. The conversation ended abruptly, with Claire hanging up before I could say more. But in that moment, I realized that I no longer needed her to see me the way she had always seen me. I didn't need her to acknowledge my worth. I had already done that for myself. The next step was more daunting, taking control of my career. I couldn't keep waiting for the perfect opportunity to land in my lap. I had spent too long hoping for someone else to believe in me. It was time to believe in myself. I began reaching out to people in the industry, making connections, pitching my designs, and showing up for myself in ways I hadn't allowed myself to before. It wasn't easy, and there were moments where I doubted myself. But every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of my power. I still had moments of fear. Moments when I wanted to retreat back into my old ways of hiding from the world, but I pushed through it. I kept reminding myself that I had a choice now. I could keep playing the role of the victim, or I could step into the light and take control of my own fate. The more I took control, the less the opinions of others mattered. And with each small victory, I felt a little bit stronger as I moved forward. I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever fully escape the emotional scars that had defined me for so long. Would I ever be free of the fear that had kept me stagnant? Or would it always linger, a shadow that followed me wherever I went? But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of that fear as heavily as I once had. I realized that the power to change my life had always been within me, just waiting for me to claim it. And as I made the choice to act, I knew that I was no longer just surviving, I was finally living. Taking control was only the first step. Now, I had a choice. How would I make them all see me? I didn't want to simply survive, wanted to make them regret the way they treated me, the way they overlooked me, and the way they thought I would disappear. There was a part of me that wanted to bring about a reckoning, a moment where everyone who had ever doubted me would have to face the consequences of their actions. I wasn't just going to rise above, I was going to rise with purpose. But the path to that goal had to be calculated. I had to think through every move, every step, and every conversation. The first thing I did was take a step back. I needed to look at the situation objectively, without the fog of my emotions clouding my judgment. I knew that to get the kind of revenge I was craving, I had to operate with precision, no impulsive actions, no outbursts. Revenge was most effective when it was executed with grace, with an understanding that the outcome would be far more satisfying if I orchestrated it carefully. I started by analyzing the people who had wronged me, one by one. Claire had been the most obvious betrayal, but she was just the beginning. There was also the investor who had dismissed me behind my back, the ones who had undermined my designs, and even those who had pretended to be my allies while secretly plotting my failure. The entire industry, with its superficiality and cruelty, had treated me like an outsider. Now, I would become the insider, the one everyone wanted to work with, the one everyone had to reckon with. But I needed to get their attention first. My mind turned to my collection. I had already poured my heart into it, and though the show had been a failure, there was still a spark of brilliance in those designs. If I could just refine them, perfect them, I could create something that would shake the very foundations of the fashion world. I would show them that they had been wrong to overlook me, to underestimate me. The power would lie in the designs themselves, their originality, their boldness, their unapologetic beauty. I began revising the collection, focusing on the elements that had been dismissed. I didn't need their approval to know that my work was good, all I needed was to believe in it again. I would refine the pieces, bring them to life in ways that made their critiques laughable. This time, I would do it on my own terms. But the real revenge, the part that would sting the most, was not in the collection alone. It was in the way I would launch it. I had a plan to make sure they would see my success, but they wouldn't be able to ignore how they had treated me. Fashion Week was the perfect stage for this. The event that had been a symbol of my failure would now become the place where I would rise. But this time, I would make sure that the right people saw my work, and I would make sure that the people who had made me feel small would know exactly what they had missed. I knew that in order to pull this off, I needed allies, but the kind of allies who believed in me, not in the old version of me, but in the one who had learned from her mistakes and was now ready to take the industry by storm. So, I began reaching out to influential people, those who had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the future I was creating. These were the people who wouldn't judge me for my background or my imperfections, but who would see me for my talent, my drive, and my vision. As the pieces of my plan fell into place, I felt a rush of excitement mixed with fear. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving to myself that I could rise. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I was doing it because I had spent too long letting my past control me. Now, it was time to take back control of my future. But in the quiet moments when I sat alone, I still couldn't shake the lingering doubt. Would the revenge I sought truly satisfy me, or would it leave me hollow, empty, and still longing for something more? Was this truly the way forward, or was I just feeding the pain that had shaped me for so long? I had no answers, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. The plan was set, and now all I had to do was execute it. I could already see the headlines, the applause, the recognition. I could already see the looks on their faces when they realized that they had underestimated me, that they had made a mistake in believing I was nothing more than a fleeting idea. But I still wondered, would it be enough to make the past fade away, or would I always be chasing a feeling that would never be fully realized? The day had arrived. The moment when everything I had worked for, everything I had planned, would come to fruition. It was Fashion Week, the very event that had once crushed my dreams, now poised to become the stage where I would reclaim my power. I stood backstage, the hum of excitement around me, but in the quiet of that moment, everything seemed too slow. The deep breath I took was the first real breath I'd had in weeks, and yet, the air felt thick, filled with an anticipation that almost made my heart race. I had meticulously arranged everything: the press, the influencers, the buyers. They would see my work, yes, but more importantly, they would see me. I had become a force, and I was about to make them all feel the weight of underestimating me. The runway was set, and the lights were poised to shine on my collection, but more than that, they were about to shine on me. I knew this wasn't just about the clothes. It was about proving to everyone, especially the people who had hurt me, that I had something they couldn't ignore. Claire's betrayal still burned within me, the investors' mockery still stung, and every dismissive glance from my so-called colleagues had left its scar. This was my chance to show them all that I was more than what they had made me feel, that I was more than the sum of their doubts and criticisms. As the models prepared backstage, I couldn't help but think about the irony of it all. Just a few months ago, I had been invisible, hiding behind my insecurities and the weight of my past. Now, I was about to take center stage and command the room. I wasn't just going to walk out there and be Sun. I was going to make them feel my presence. Every step, every look, every design was going to hit them with the full force of everything I had endured. The first model stepped out. Her confident stride echoing in the silence. The crowd murmured, impressed by the bold colors, the daring cuts, and the originality that screamed from each piece. My designs were no longer something to be dismissed, they were something to be revered. And with each model that walked, I felt the tension in my chest begin to melt away. This was the moment I had worked for, and now, it was mine to claim. But then, I saw them. Claire, the investor, the people who had mocked me in the past. They were there, sitting in the front row, their eyes fixed on the runway. And for the first time, I didn't feel a rush of anger. Instead, I felt a strange calm. This was no longer about them. It was about me, about who I had become in the process. They could sit there, judgmental and smug, but they would never understand what it took to get here. And in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval. The applause, the recognition, it wasn't for them, it was for me. As the final model took her turn on the runway, the room erupted in applause. The crowd was on their feet, and I could hear the excitement building. The fashion world was waking up to what I had known all along. My designs weren't just good, they were groundbreaking. They were revolutionary, and they had no choice but to see me now. But in that brief, fleeting moment of triumph, a thought lingered. Was this really what I had wanted all along? The revenge, the validation. Yes, it felt sweet, like a long overdue acknowledgement of my worth. But deep down, something inside me knew that this was only a chapter, not the end of the story. There would always be more to prove, more to fight for. But what had changed was that I had finally come to realize that the fight was never about them, it was about me. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy of all that I had achieved. And as I stood there, watching the crowd's admiration, I knew that this was just the beginning. The past had no more hold over me. I was finally free to create, free to live, free to be who I was meant to be. The satisfaction of revenge was there. But it wasn't as powerful as I had imagined. It wasn't the grand, soul-satisfying victory I had once thought it would be. It was simply a stepping stone, a moment in time that would fade with the passing days. But the feeling of having taken control that would stay with me. And in that realization, I found peace.